Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Fenyo Mwindi. I'm the Chief Resident here at SAI. I welcome you to the Cohort 6 Pitch Day. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge that we live, work, and learn on the traditional lands of many tribes of indigenous people across North America. We acknowledge the past, the present, and the future human impact our communities have on indigenous ways of life in the land we inhabit. We honor with gratitude the land itself as a living entity that supports countless interconnected beings and the ongoing connections of indigenous people to these waters, lands, plants, and animals. As we continue to gather virtually from around the country, we encourage you to learn more about indigenous ways, who people have stewarded and who continue to steward the land you inhabit, and to continue seeking ways to honor and cultivate meaningful relationships with indigenous peoples, non-human animals, the land, and the water. Let's make an effort to do more together. Please visit our website to learn more on what you can do. So let me tell you a bit about SAI. What SAI, we try to make it easier for scholars and practitioners to develop and launch the next generation of programs that connect science and society. You may be wondering why that is the case. Well, it's really hard to build these initiatives, whether it's funding issues, policies, mentorship, evaluations, you name it. All these are massive obstacles for these courageous individuals that are trying to make a difference out there in the space between science and society. So SAI is an incubator. We provide infrastructure, community, training, mentorship, funding, ultimately to enable and accelerate the building of these next generation programs, the interface between science and society. Our fellows and residents work on diverse projects, and I cannot really go in depth here. I encourage you to go to our website and check them out and learn more about what they do. The SAI Fellows Program is at the core of our initiatives. It's our flagship program. Over 10 weeks, fellows are mentored one-on-one and in group discussions, weekly group discussions. They get some funding, much needed funding, and have access to the network within SAI and also externally of residents and fellows to help them launch these initiatives that they're most of the time launching from basically an idea stage. So we take them from that idea and hopefully to something launchable that you will see today. And over 10 weeks, they go through a whole gamut of things, looking at evaluation, looking at leadership, looking at how, logic models. So you may hear a couple of those buzzwords being sent out by the fellows. But ultimately, we try to help them launch these initiatives. And today, you're going to get to see those programs be formally launched to the world. The program is accepting applications. It's actually right now, Cohort 7. Deadline is December 31st, so don't delay too long. We are going to be waiting for all your applications. Cohort 6, so today we have 5 fellows that will be presenting their work. Rose, Amanda, Sam, Khushbu, Sarah, I wanted to say thank you for taking a chance with us and riding this wave. Hopefully it was a fun ride for you all. And I just can't wait to see you out there in the world, executing on your programs and just making an impact and out there in the world. Big thanks to our mentors as well. This would not be possible without you guys, Pete, Gorlivleen, Jessica, Maria. It's been absolutely fantastic to just work with you. And again, this would not be possible without you. The community, SAI community, Claire, Bree, Nico, staff members, again, thank you for just everything that you do every day. The residents, much appreciated for, again, interacting and showcasing the fellows, what goes on in SAI. We live on Slack, for those who don't know, and so that's where all the action takes place. Our funders, BWF, supported previous cohorts, and ScienceBox is supporting the current cohort. STEM peers as well. Thank you for your support. All of you guys, thank you for everything that you're doing and providing us the funding to do this work and experiment. So today, what's going to happen today? All the fellows have 5 minutes. They get to pitch, and then follow each presentation. There'll be 10 minutes of discussion. And so here is when all the audience, both here in Zoom and those on YouTube, we want to drop their questions in the chat. For those of you in the Zoom, can raise a hand and we'll pick on you and say, go ahead and ask your question. We hope we can get through most of the questions, but we may not be able to do that. So I apologize in advance, but feel free to drop those questions in the chat because the presenters later on may be able to write the responses to you directly, okay? Please make sure that you also give us feedback. We're gonna drop in a survey link shortly to share with you all so that we would love to get this feedback both on the event itself, but also for the fellows who would love to hear, hey, what did you like about the presentation? You know, what advice do you have for future presentations that they'll end up doing? And this is one of many, hopefully, they'll do in the future, in the long future. So without further ado, I promised them I'll only take 5 minutes, and I believe I'm exactly at time. This is our presentation order for today. There won't be much in between. I'll be the host managing the transition points. But so with that, I would like to open this pitch day formally and welcome Sam to the stage. Sam, welcome.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen here. So there we go. There is my screen. I am here to talk about relatively prime next generation storytellers in the mathematical domain. And I am Samuel Hansen. I am a mathematical storyteller. I have created a number of different mathematical podcasts over the year, including Relatively Prime, Maths, and Strongly Connected Components. And I am also the math and stats librarian for University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So I'm here to talk to you about a pretty big problem, and that's that people don't like math. I mean, they really do not like it. I'm not entirely sure why, because I happen to love it, but I think I might know one of the reasons, and that's that people don't see themselves within mathematics, and it's particularly true for minoritized and marginalized identities. And that actually leads people to not see themselves as belonging in math. And if you don't belong somewhere, you're not exactly gonna like it, right? And this ends up becoming a feedback loop, because if you don't belong, you're not gonna do it. And if people don't do it, people who are like them will not see themselves within mathematics. So it's this big loop, but I think I know how to solve this problem. And we need to tell more mathematical stories. I mean, stories have been shown to be one of the best ways to connect people and to create a sense of belonging. But these are big problems and big solutions, and we need solvable problems. So here's my idea of a solvable problem. There's not enough mathematical storytellers. More storytellers would mean more stories, a wider range of perspectives. But there's even a problem with this. There exists no formal training for mathematical storytellers. None. So even if a mathematician wants to tell a story, it's really hard for them to learn how to do so. And I know this personally, because over a decade ago, I wanted to tell mathematical stories, and I looked and I couldn't find anyone to help me learn how. So I had to do it myself. And I don't want anyone else to have to do it themselves in the future. But let's look at what does exist. So there are some communication-focused math courses. MIT has some, University of Missouri, Kansas City, but these are scholarly communications, academic writing, pedagogy, and their math classes first. Communication classes second. There's also science communication trainings. I mean, there's centers that do it. There's master's degrees at multiple places, including Santa Cruz, but even Santa Cruz, the largest of them, hasn't had more than 7 or 8 mathematicians ever even take their master's courses. And none of them have a math-focused component. If you just search for the word math at the Alda Center, you get no results whatsoever. And then in order to get a better sense of what mathematicians think, I did an informal survey, about 32 mathematicians. Most of them had no formal communications training. They weren't very confident on telling mathematical narratives, but they were excited to learn how. Over 62% were excited to learn how. And if you don't believe me about there not being enough math stories, only one mathematician, one, thought there were enough math stories in the media. So let's get to my solution for this, and that's creating a program to train math storytellers. And this cohort should have a wide range of identities, so more people will have a chance to see themselves as belonging in mathematics. And so I want to present to you Relatively Prime next generation storytellers. And I'd read the rest of this, but I think that video tells it even better. But none of this speaks directly to telling math. And I'm gonna guess here. Oh no, I did share the sound. Sorry for going backwards. I was worried, but here we go one more time. Very sorry. But none of this speaks directly to telling mathematical stories, even though mathematics is at the foundation of it all. Why not? What gives? Well, now there's somewhere to turn. Relatively Prime Next Generation Storytellers in the Mathematical Domain is the first of its kind, a holistic program for mathematicians who want to tell interesting, relatable, and most of all, mathematical stories. Okay, so that's just a snippet of this video that I had my friend Rob Schultz help me make. And let me tell you about this program. It has 3 steps. There's a storytelling training retreat, there's the production of stories, and then there's their release. So this retreat, it's intensive, it's hands-on, it's interactive workshops and community building about mathematical communication, storytelling and narrative, and audio production. And then the storytellers will get to go out into the world and tell their stories, giving them real world experience and providing them with a built-in audience. And so they will research, pitch, report their stories. I will work directly with them to edit and produce them. And then they will be released on Relatively Prime, stories from the mathematical domain, which gets me to the existing infrastructure that I can tap into for this project. It will be built on top of the brand of Relatively Prime. It's an award-winning podcast. It debuted in the Apple Podcast Top 60. There's over 3,000 subscribers right now. 2 seasons successfully funded through Kickstarter, 3rd through Patreon, had a bunch of live shows. And I have connections to SciComm organizations, mathematical organizations. I've written for the A Periodical, guested on many podcasts. I have over 1,000 Twitter followers. I've won story grants to go report stories around. I have this infrastructure. And then I also have developed some new things. I have the new website. I have an informational video. I've done this survey of mathematicians, which leads me to the need that I have to raise more money, hopefully through grants. And I definitely want to involve the crowdfunding because I've always done that with Relatively Prime. I want to keep that community. I also need to develop the retreat curriculum and then, of course, recruit participants. And so that brings me to the end here. So I want to thank SAI. I want to thank Fanuel, and I want to thank my mentor, Gerlovlin, and my contact information is on the side, as well as a link to the slides. And if anyone has any questions, I can answer them for you. Thank you so much for listening to my pitch.
All right, Sam, first one ready to go. So the floor is open. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, drop a question in the chat. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can drop it in the chat there and we'll promise hopefully get to those questions as well. So I want to open up the field very quickly. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about how you plan to measure impact, or what are those metrics that you will be tracking moving forward?
So to measure impacts, I will be doing a pre and post test for all the participants around their ability and confidence in telling mathematical stories. So I want to make sure that I am definitely doing what I'm aiming to, which is create new storytellers. And storytellers are confident in telling their stories. And then I also will look to see what sort of impact this has on the greater world by seeing how many people download it, how many new subscribers that I get through this by bringing these new stories out there. So we'll have download numbers, subscriber numbers, just the total number of stories put into the world, because part of this is just creating more stories to exist, more math stories for people to consume. So those are the main measures that I will be using.
Great. The floor is open. So Jessica says a comment here. Great job, Sam. I wonder if you have connected with Amanda Coletti. She's one of our C5 cohort. She has a lot of experience as well in science communication, teaching folk how to tell stories. It's Amanda Coletti from the C5.
I have not, but I definitely look forward to connecting with Amanda.
Yeah, and this is a very important point, the connecting, right, and bridging the field, right, is a big challenge in terms of practitioners finding each other and collaborating, right? So one of the things with the program is to bridge those gaps. And so definitely, for those of you watching this later as well, if you are well aligned with what Sam is pitching here, make sure you get get in touch with him. We have a question from Peter. Peter, go for it.
Hey, Sam, great presentation. Thank you so much for that. And I apologize if I've got 3 kids running around and my wife is off doing something else. So if somebody runs in, I apologize. But I was really like, I love what you're doing, and I love that you're adding this kind of layer of the ability to do science communication for people. And this is a much bigger ask, what I'm about to say, but I think that there's an issue just in science training in general that we lack communication training, period. And I'm curious if you've ever tried to connect with people at universities and whatnot. One of the things I'm trying to do is really start to improve science communication among our medical students where I'm at. I'm curious if you've ever tried to reach out and start like advocating for communication courses being a part of graduate school curriculum, period. As a librarian, I feel like you have an ability to kind of insert yourself into some of those conversations.
I have. And so at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, there is a science communication certificate that's already available. I do help with that. But the thing is it only gets scientists, because mathematicians don't always see themselves as being a part of that whole, of the science community. There's some separation there, and there are some different communication skills needed in mathematics versus some of the lab sciences, definitely, say biology, where you have things that people are more generally connected with, and you have things like large mammals that have cute faces. As much as I happen to love the number B prime L, not that many other people, it's my favorite number. Not that many other people have this cuddly feeling that I do towards B prime L. And so you do have some different things there. So I have done some of that, but I really want to focus on this math area because there is training for the rest of the sciences. No, and it's really math where there is some of the issues.
So we have a question from YouTube. Do you also reach out internationally?
So I do work with some of the math communicators that exist in England, and I will admit, England has a much healthier math communication landscape than the United States does, but there's still not formal training even there. But there are things like, I will forget the name of the conference, but it's one that I take part in that gave me a great maths communicator pin. Now, of course, there is a problem that they do say maths instead of math, but I have not reached out that much internationally outside the English speaking world because that is the language that I speak. But I do hope if I can create a curriculum that works here, that very similar things, and I would do it in a very open source way. So I would be more than willing to share that out. And if I could get it translated, I will. And to help everyone, because math is an international endeavor and everyone everywhere needs to be able to be a part of it.
This is a question from Jim. Jim is one of our supporters, very close supporters of SAI. What is your favorite math story?
Oh, that's really hard. I will tell you my favorite of all of the stories I've ever reported. And that is it's the story of the AI Chinook. So Chinook was developed by Jonathan Schaefer, who is a mathematician at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And so it was originally for playing chess, but there's so many chess ones out there. So he decided to put it towards checkers and ended up in this dramatic rivalry with Marion Tinsley, the greatest human grandmaster of checkers of all time. And they kept on fighting at these major checkers tournaments. And it was never clear which of the two was actually better. And then this story has death, it has hubris, it has people doing the devil's work, or at least claims of it. And then eventually it ends with Chinook defeating the game of checkers. And it's one of the most brilliant human stories that I have ever had the pleasure of telling. And so it's one that I really love. You can find it at relprime.com/Chinook, or just search Relatively Prime and Chinook, that's CHINOOK, just in any search engine, and it should pop up.
Wonderful. Sam, this was great. Thank you for leading us off in the pitch day today.
Very happy to do so. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you to all the rest of my cohort. And I can't wait to see all of your pitches.
Yay. Okay, so with that, Sam, there'll be other questions in the chat. They may come up, so just keep an eye out there, okay? Okay, so up next, Khushbu. And just a side note, she was my mentee. Go for it. Go for it, Khushbu.
Thank you. All right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Khushbu. I'll quickly get into the introduction. So I'm an artistically inclined engineer and a recent master's in STEM education, or something that I really find a lot of belongingness in calling myself is a maker. So who really is a maker? Well, anyone who makes or creates from their hands can be called a maker. Human beings are naturally designed to be makers. So basically, we're all makers. But me, as a maker, I'm particularly interested in designing hands-on learning tools in the field of STEM, and most particularly in engineering and mathematics. So I have used making as a tool to be empowered and to make others curious about STEM. So what is my issue then? Well, I have struggled, like as I mentioned, that making is my bread and butter. And when I go back to the struggles that I'm mentioning, there have been times where I feel stuck in this limbo of not knowing how to fix the gear dimensions. I come from India, and the number of times that I've reached out to people in the UK, in US to help me with just random stuff because I was frustrated. And I realized that there is a huge lack of recurring collaboration and mentorship in the maker community. Speaking from personal experience, this was something very recent that I was working on. It's a kinetic sculpture that I was trying to build before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, I had to change my medium from wood and acrylic to paper, strings, and something that I commonly found in my dorm. And eventually it hit a roadblock and I had to stop doing it because I didn't know where to take this project. So I looked up a couple of resources that exist and have been helping me throughout. And they can be in the form of open source resources or museums that have interactive stations where I could, go and practice hands-on making, which was, again, a bummer because of the pandemic. There's always the DIY culture and the maker movement, which is on a huge roll lately. But the major drawback with these portals is that either they're very robotics or tech heavy, which means they need a very high level of entry point or require a lot of skill, which can be intimidating for a lot of new makers. The other thing is about social media, which I'm sure you guys know about, is putting your best foot forward. So everyone puts in the finished product out there, and the frustration, the struggles are, and the process, which is basically messy, is all often concealed. So my solution is Maker Exchange, and I intend to create a marketplace for creators or makers, particularly in the field of STEM education, which is informal and messy, to exchange ideas and collaborate. So the way that I think that this should be designed is in the form of conducting monthly meetup sessions. The goal is to have a centralized space for makers to come together, share not only their ideas, but also their struggles, their goof ups, and also maybe build prototypes together or talk about something that they built during the month. And the most important thing is collaboration, which is not just one time, but something that keeps happening regularly, periodically, or more often. So in a nutshell, the design of Maker Exchange as a platform begins by filling out a monthly survey, which the makers fill out when they reach on the platform. What they do is fill out the topics that they're interested in talking about, which could be, hey, I'm trying to build a curriculum about how do I make evaporation easier or more visual or more tangible to my class. Or it could simply be, hey, I was trying to sketch something and I don't know how to make it a reality. And then once we have a survey, a randomly generated topic would be decided, and then a newsletter would be sent out to the makers who filled this short survey, and they'll know about the topic that they'll be talking about during the monthly meetup. And finally, they all meet up and share or discuss or simply share stories. All right, so I have tried to get the word out through a couple of people that I've worked with as a researcher myself. And there's a professor at Tufts who researches maker spaces particularly. Maker spaces are physical spaces with equipment and machinery that empower makers to kind of make more stuff quickly, or to kind of make more mistakes easily, because they're machines and they make it easier to make, break, or create. So my professor was really excited about this idea and really encouraged me, because he said that he emphasized that there's a need for a centralized common place for makers to come together and basically talk about their frustrations, is what he mentioned. Something else happened where I presented at the first maker education conference, and the organizer reached out to me asking for collaboration when I shared this idea with her. So that is something that is in the works. And the most recent National Science Foundation grant was a $75,000 grant money towards a maker education conference. So yay. So in a nutshell, the funding model is pretty low entry, and it starts off with a gracious seed funding from SAI, which I have used so far to buy the domain, but will be using to expand and develop my website. The other thing that I'd be using my seed funding money for is to create a subscription-based meetup platform, which I'm thinking would either be GatherTown or Zoom or Discord. I'm kind of torn apart between these three platforms. In the longer run, I plan to write more, go into grant writing and seek partnerships, mainly because the main goal is to actually have an annual conference on a yearly basis, of course, and to build the team and collaborate on an international level, hopefully. So some of the next steps here are, like I said, website development being the first and foremost, meetup platform finalization, and then eventually getting into the running monthly meetups section. And the final goal would be an annual MakerCon. These are some of the extended outcomes that I will not get into the nitty-gritties of, but this is kind of, these are some of the ways that I feel that Maker Exchange can be really used effectively to develop. And finally, to finish it, I am running solo, but until yesterday, literally last night, I received a text from a friend back in India who runs a STEM-based toy company and asked me in on the team. So I think I have a new team member. I don't know if it's not official, so I didn't add it, but please join my team if you like this idea or if you believe in this idea like I do. And I would love to make and break and create together. And lastly, special thank you to Fanuel for so much. Liz, like I have been confused and haphazard and frazzled most of the time. So thank you, Fanuel. SAI for all the support, and my fellow fellows for all the encouragement, support, and feedback. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, the stage is open for questions. I believe we had the first one from Niba earlier, saying, have you considered looking at the Simmons Foundation, for example, for funding? Like basically the board question there is, what kind of organization or foundations would you look into for potential funding beyond this, beyond SAI?
Yeah, I think as of now, it's just the National Science Foundation. But the other thing that I'm considering is partnerships with a couple of museums in the US to begin with, like the Exploratorium or the Museum of Science, because I have had a chance of interacting with someone from the Museum of Science, and they seemed pretty interested in, getting started with this storytelling or a shared platform where people could just come and talk about ideas, because that is something that's really missing in the community. So I guess these are some short-term people that I want to really reach out to ASAP.
Great. The floor is open. Yeah. Oh, so Niba is saying that in the chat here, I guess my question could apply to everyone here. And this is something that we'll ask everybody. Niba, foundations are a great source of funding, but often overlooked. And a lot of them don't have websites, by the way. A lot of them do not. And so you need to kind of be look around quite extensively to find them. Same question that I asked Sam earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about your KPIs?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, the survey that the makers fill in when they are on the platform of Maker Exchange would be my biggest measurement of the impact. I'm hoping that it increases every month, hopefully, and the diversity of topics that we include in the show and tell or sharing sessions. That is something that I'm hoping to look at, the KPIs as. And the other thing that I feel would be really good to have is, like I mentioned, diversity, not like, especially from the marginalized communities. I would really want more women makers to kind of come in, and not just engineers or artists or designers, but also, people who feel not very confident about making. They need to know that there's a safe space for everyone, irrespective of what skill level they hold, to kind of come in. So yeah, the diversity, I guess, and skill would be a great measurement factor for me too.
Awesome. So I have time. I'm going to ask one more question from the chat. There's lots of them, but Khushbu, please make sure you can address them in the chat. So I'll ask. Let's see here. So talk quickly about the targeted participants, like who exactly is your audience, and we'll close out with that. And the other questions, Khushbu, if you can just answer them in the chat.
Sure. So my target audience, like I mentioned, I'm mainly focusing. I feel that everyone's a maker, but because I am personally a maker who has a background in engineering, but not a background in art, so I struggle with the cross-disciplinary realm of two rigid disciplines, at least to how the society views as fields or discrete fields, and something that cannot be matched, but there are so many overlaps. So I guess my target audience is mainly people who are looking at these collaborations or these interdisciplinary lenses, especially when it comes to hands-on making. But again, I definitely don't want to narrow it down to just that. I want it to be as broader a canvas for more and more people to come in and share.
Awesome. This is great. So Khushbu, you have a lot of work to do in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep going. And so next up, Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, so I'm Sarah Lamm. I'm a PhD student in geology. I've interned at NASA. I've worked on NASA's Curiosity rover. I'm from rural Kansas, one of the most remote locations in America. We are, I think Washington Post did a study, and I'm the 9th most rural place in America because I'm so far from the next metropolitan center. And I was the Kansas State Student SciComm Award winner in 2020. And my project is Rocks and Rockets.
Sarah, so, we can see your preview slide. So I don't know, your next slide. So maybe you may want to switch displays. Yeah, just heads up.
Is that better?
No, we're still seeing the next slide still. Yeah.
Does
Perfect.
That work?
You got
All
it.
right. Okay, so the problem is that rural communities do not have as many STEM opportunities as urban or suburban communities. This is even worse for rural communities that are far away from those metropolitan areas. So the map on the right is one I've made, and it's showing like the population centers of Kansas. So my hometown is directly in the center of this outline. So this is the region I really want to target because of how rural it is and how far it is from the next biggest area. So even in, like, we are far from like Colorado metropolitan areas, from Nebraska metropolitan areas, and Kansas metropolitan areas. So I want to bring these opportunities directly to this area. So we have the date. I signed the contract, June 18, 2022. We are having Rocks and Rockets in Colby, Kansas, and we are trying to hit this major region. So this is being funded by the STEM Advocacy Institute and the Geological Society of America. So the picture on the top left here is the Colby Event Center. It's one of the newest buildings in Colby. Then we have one of our past events entrance tables. So when you enter the building, you're going to be greeted. You're going to get free stickers about space and rocks, and we'll have a sign-in sheet. That way we know like who is coming, like how many people are actually here. And with that sign-in, we're also going to have a very short survey of like, how much do you even know about geology? So we can gauge that kind of interaction of how much do you know? And then we'll have a post survey as they are literally leaving of how much did you learn today? In the bottom right, I have a full-scale model of the Curiosity rover made out of PVC pipe that I've designed. And then on the right is a giant Mars map. It's 25 by 25 feet. And for our event, we'll actually be able to have two of them back to back. So we can have younger groups on one edge and then older groups on the other one. So we'll have this constantly going. And then in the lecture rooms, we're going to have mini SciComm lectures about various topics. We'll have outdoor activities. And in the last gym, we'll have all these different booths that have different activities going on to teach you about either space or geology. So for the landscape analysis, there are no community events or no community science events in Northwest Kansas before we began our outreach efforts. There just isn't. They said the closest thing my event sounded like was the Home and Garden Show. And I was like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But that's the closest event that we have out there. In this society and community, we have nothing offered to middle schoolers besides summer softball or baseball, the movie theater, or the pool. That is what we've offered to middle schoolers in this area. So we need to bring something more than just that. So Rocks and Rockets will bring science activities to these rural communities in a welcoming and engaging atmosphere. So we've tried to do traction. I kind of already assumed it wasn't going to work. That's not really what my community does. Like they'll show up the day of, but they're not going to tell you that they're going to show up. So this is from a very past event about 2019. And you can see all these responses were just nothing, but who actually came? We had huge turnouts. This one in Colby, it had 45 people responded, but then over 100 people came. So while we've tried to do like a little survey of like who's all going to come to this June 18 event, there were 0 responses, but that doesn't worry us. Here was the digital ad from 2019. So it reached about 10,000 people. The engagements were 1,000, but we had a total of 500 people. So that's about 50% of overall engagements. So we assume that there will be a huge turnout, especially since of all the past events we've done that have always had huge turnouts. So for the funding models, for year 1, we are using grants from the STEM Advocacy Institute and the Geological Society of America. This is to rent the building, start the website, and then buy reusable and sustainable products. Year 2, we want to switch to local businesses for sponsorship after we have shown that this is needed in our community and we have made a true difference. So that's where that survey comes in and the literal numbers of this is how many people attended our event. So for the team, it's me and then Jeanette Bosch, who's a former science teacher, also from rural Kansas, attended Teacher Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, has successfully applied to get giant Mars maps from the Buzz Aldrin Foundation twice. So really a heavy hitter in her own right. And actually she is my aunt. So it's kind of also like a family project. So for next steps, so year 1, we are doing this huge event to get things really started. So the next step for me is to start reaching out to geology and astronomy departments in Kansas to present in Colby, Kansas. And then year 2, we are actually going to do smaller events in the smallest high schools in Kansas, whether in person or virtual, because we want to give them direct attention, because these are the high schools that never get these kind of opportunities. So when you want to give them very good direct attention. And then year 3, we are hoping to go back to the big event and have the big event being every other year, while the smaller high schools get every other year. So thank you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much. The floor is open for questions. Rose, do you want to ask your question out loud, please?
Yeah, sure. Sarah, I love this idea. I lived in a pretty rural town for 6 years. But I was wondering, what do you think about expanding this to other remote rural communities in other states, down the line for the future?
Oh yeah, I'm all for it. But the first few years, we really need to get it started in Kansas. Part of the website, we're actually going to use more as like a depository of like, this is how we've done it. This is how we got that interaction, because I can already tell you, my community will never look at my website. That's just not how they function, and that's okay. But we want to make Rocks and Rockets, like the website, more useful and like replicatable for all other rural communities.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, so one of the first things I want to put up there is actually like the design model for my full-scale PVC pipe Curiosity rover, because I don't think that's been published or released anywhere, at least not that I remember doing. So
Sarah, can you talk more about who do you hope to actually will attend this this event, the audience?
Yes, so at least in ages of like students, we are trying to hit both middle school and high school, specifically middle schoolers, because our community just doesn't offer anything for them, and also high schoolers, because they're about to go off to college and they have to start looking at these events. So that's why I'm going to reach out to geology and astronomy departments in Kansas to actually come out and be college recruiters as well. So I've had positive feedback from both University of Kansas's geology department and then Kansas State University's geology department. So they are both interested in coming out and like being college recruiters. Then the third thing I want is to literally bring parents out as well, because when I wanted to pursue geology, my parents, who are fairly educated, even they were asked like, what can you do with a geology degree? So they were not initially supportive. So that's why I want to have a community event and not just a school event, because I need to bring in those parents and show them, hey, your children can go out, get geology degrees, and have very successful careers. So it's not just convincing the students, it's convincing the parents.
Great. Comment from Claire here. So cool, Sarah, do you have any plans to work with local science teachers to try to get their support in getting students and families to attend the event?
Yes, I'm hoping in the spring semester to start going out to the surrounding local schools and start talking to them about like, hey, here's like a short presentation I did. If you like this, come to our big event. So that's part one. And then part two is the day before the event, or maybe the week of, but before it happens, we want to hold a continuing education credit seminar. Since my aunt is actually formerly a teacher, she can like create all this curriculum. So we want to have a continuing education event for these teachers and get them pumped, and also try to incorporate geology into their own classroom. Yeah, and if we do create curriculum, that's something that will also go up on our website.
That's great. And just for everybody to know, one of the things that we have fellows do is to do something called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So Sarah, could you tell us what threats are you're afraid of, are you anticipating, and what's your mitigation approach?
Well, the first one is actually a recent one, and that's gas prices. Like, what do you do? Because that has just spiked. So while we could get the like literal people from Colby to come when we're trying to hit the bigger region, we might have to do more online events. So we were already talking about how to instantly make our lectures that day hybrid. So if they couldn't attend, we were hoping that all of the demonstration booths we had, we will write up a curriculum and send that to their local science teachers, that even if they can't come to our event, they can then do them later in their own school. So we've been looking at the gas prices. And then another threat would be just, what if something else gets scheduled that day? So we already have now rented the building, and it's the biggest building in Colby. So we don't think another huge event will be that day, but that doesn't mean that there won't be like sports where they have to go off somewhere, or weddings, because it is June. So we're not sure exactly how to mitigate all of those, but I think part of it will be the same as before, of we release all this curriculum anyways, so they can do it at home. Well, certain experiments at home.
And of course, even from the work of piecework, actually looking at that, these events will tend to self-select, right? That only certain types of people will tend to attend these things, right? And I think you have to sort of think about, okay, how do we reach out that community that normally wouldn't even consider coming out, right? Do you go to them and so forth? Anyway, just I'm curious if you've thought about it.
I actually don't think that's as big a problem in my community, because there's nothing else going on. I understand in bigger cities that that's a huge problem. Like, why would I go to a science event when I have all these other things I can do? But in my community, that's not the case. People who have no interest in guns and coins go to the gun and coin show every year just to see what's going on. Like, I don't own a home, but I go to the home and garden show every year. So that's why in one way, I actually think that's a strength, not a threat, because when there's nothing else to do, the people who aren't interested in science, they will still show up, I promise you, because they always have. Like, we've had this at previous events where they didn't like science, but nothing else was happening.
Wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much. And looking forward to seeing this event launch, and we'll be here to cheer you on. Okay, up next to the hot seat is Rose. Rose, welcome.
Thank you. Let me get this set up. Okay. All right. So I just want to take an opportunity and get y'all thinking. So how many of you have played a board game before? Did you have fun with it? Now, I want you to take a second to think about those feelings, whether it be excitement, competitiveness, or happiness over spending time with loved ones. Now, what if you could harness the power and excitement of board games to teach complex science topics in the classroom? EvoHom strives to make biological anthropology more accessible to educators at underserved high schools in rural and urban communities by providing an engaging and interesting board game that can be easily incorporated into the classroom for free. Now, before we dive deeper into the bones that make up EvoHom, I just want to take a second to introduce myself. So my name's Rose Leach, and I'm a biological anthropologist by trade. And some of you might be wondering, well, what exactly is biological anthropology? So biological anthropology investigates human and non-human primate evolution and variation by studying at this intersection between behavior, ecology, and biology. So apart from that, I'm an explorer, a maker, and also a huge board game enthusiast. So most of this stems from my childhood. So I grew up as an only child. And so there was a lot of time where I had to entertain myself, where I was just liking to craft and just explore my surroundings. But some of my most treasured memories are spending time with family and loved ones, and that was often through board games. And so it really gave us this opportunity to connect and interact with each other over a fun and engaging activity. Now, going through school, I always had a hard time with lecture-based lessons. And I always thought to myself, well, what if they could incorporate board games into teaching? And so this kind of brings us to the problem. So I noticed high school educators really struggle to create fun and engaging activities for understanding biological anthropology. Now you might be asking, well, why is that? We wondered too. So we sent out a survey to educators and we asked, what are your biggest barriers to developing and incorporating alternative teaching methods? 100% of respondents said time. And an overwhelming number, 80%, also said funding. So the two biggest were time and funding. Some other issues they cited were administrative support, issues with incorporating this into their curriculum, and some had technology issues too. So this is where EvoHom comes in. So EvoHom is a cooperative board game with a competitive element. And so what happens is you start off with a randomized environmental scenario. Now, this is based off of human, fossil, paleoclimate data, so real data. And you start off as an ancestral human family with a random set of characteristics. And you have to work with other players to expand and evolve your family to best survive in the given environment. So this is going to involve collaboration and cooperation with other players. And you might be wondering, well, how does that happen? So you have to work to reproduce with other players' families to increase the variety in your gene pool, evolve your characteristics, and increase your chances at becoming best fit for the environment. Now, we have some specific outcomes we had in mind when developing EvoHom. We want to increase generally awareness, understanding, and excitement about biological anthropology and human evolution as a whole in underserved high schools. We're looking to increase knowledge about what exactly biological anthropology is and its place in science. And hopefully this will help increase general support and knowledge for research in biological anthropology. And we really, really want to increase the amount of accessible educational games for the classroom, and all of this specifically in urban and rural high schools. So in our survey, we also asked biology teachers, are you interested in free board games to help teach evolution to students? We had 6 respondents so far, but these are just preliminary data, and it is an open and ongoing survey. But so far, the response has been overwhelming. As you can see here, 100% of biology teachers are interested in free board games. So you might be thinking, hey, aren't there already science games out there? Haven't been, have board games around been for a while? Absolutely. So educational games have been around for a long time, and there are definitely a lot of educational board games in science. And so I have here some of the bigger board game publishers that are focused specifically in science, and a couple of titles from some other publishers specifically in human evolution. But currently published games are more rooted in chemistry, cellular biology, ecology, and math. And though there are games about evolution, they're more focused on non-human animals. The games that do exist for human evolution are actually aimed for adult audiences and are mostly too complex to play a game within one class period. So this is where EvoHom differs. So I created STEMsapien Games, the publishing company through which we're going to publish our first title, EvoHom. So EvoHom and STEMsapien Games is different because we provide a lesson plan to make incorporating game-based learning into your curriculum easier. And so this is going to be individualized with each board game that we publish. Also, games for the class are provided free of charge, no crowdfunding needed. And these are specifically designed with high school audiences in mind and can be played in the classroom. So this is what we have done so far with EvoHom. We've done our survey, and we've done a couple of informational interviews with teachers. And within that survey, 80% of the respondents actually opted to provide their email to hear more about EvoHom in the future. And so we're starting with our mailing list from there. We've also launched our company website and done the domain, and we've created an Instagram account to help build a following. And in the few days since its launch, we have over 40 followers now. And so our next steps are developing the prototype and hiring an artist. Currently, I'm the only person on our team, but we're looking to hire an artist. So if you know of anyone who might be interested, let me know. Then we'll go on with playtesting. And the ultimate goal for EvoHom in particular is to launch a Kickstarter to fund the production of this board game, which we hope to launch in summer of 2022. And so that's one of the funding models we have in mind is crowdfunding. We also anticipate doing sales through our website and other outlets online. And so the proceeds from the crowdfunding and the sales on our website will be used to manufacture more copies of board games. And that's where we're able to provide these board games for free to high school teachers in those underserved communities. And we couldn't have done this without partnerships, and particularly with SAI, who has generally provided seed funding to help us get started in our endeavors. And all of this together is to really build a foundation with which we can publish multiple board games in the future. And I just want to take a second to thank SAI and specifically Jasmine and Fanuel, who have been so much help and have been awesome mentors throughout this process. And if you're interested in hearing more about STEM Sapien Games and EvoHum, here's our website and our Instagram. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Rose. Thank you so much. I'm seeing claps from a lot of the members here in the room. The floor is open, everyone. Okay, I don't see any arms up raised yet. Okay, I'm gonna throw the first question, Rose. KPI, if you had to pick a metric, impact metric for you, that would be critical for your company, I guess, right? STEM Sapien company. What would that be?
So I think focused on our mission, right, is to bring these games to educators in underserved communities. I think the biggest metric for us is getting referrals by word of mouth from other teachers and seeing interest from other teachers at different schools wanting to incorporate these board games into their curricula.
Yeah, I think that's always a big challenge, identifying something that, you know, this is a thing that you'll be tracking throughout, right? That if this goes up, we're doing something right.
Exactly.
You know? And so it's a challenge for all of us. And I think as you all are launching yourselves into this domain as practitioners, right? It's going to change. You're going to be adapting a little bit, right? You're going to learn something new as you go along. Okay, we have time, lots of time here for other questions. So there's a question here, one potential resource to check out to find a game designer, Lifeology. Yes, lifeology.io. Rose, check that out. They work to pair psychomers with artists, indeed. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because something I wanted to focus on was people who aren't well represented in board games. And I wanted to put a focus on getting, women and artists who aren't well represented in the community to work on these games with me.
Yeah. Pete?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, and maybe this is the part that's still to come. Like, what is this board game going to look like? What are you moving pieces around? Like, how does it actually work?
Yes, I was hoping someone would ask you that. I didn't want to get too deep into the mechanics in my presentation, but what I'm envisioning is kind of like Catan. So the environment's always changing, right? You're flipping over tiles. You have a tile for resources, and it might be far away from your establishment. And so you'll take rounds where you have this worker placement element. So you start off with a family of 1 or 2 people. And so you're working together to gather resources and reproduce with other players to grow your family. And each time you are reproducing with a different family. So another player is going to have a different set of characteristics. And I imagine this to be like numerical. So like brain size, right, is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being largest. So you'll roll the dice and it has to be within the range of what your family is and what their family is to kind of represent that, that genetic admixture and to represent how phenotypes aren't just 50-50, right? And so that's kind of how I envision it. And then it'll be played over eras, right? So large chunks of time.
Okay.
And so that's how that'll be working. Yeah.
I have one other question to go with this, because this is aimed at largely high school and middle school, right?
Yes.
How do you feel this idea of reproducing with other players in the game is going to go over within that age range?
That is one potential issue. I am not entirely sure, but it's something I think I'll find out in playtesting. So one of the things I'm envisioning with playtesting is I'm on the education committee for the American Association of Biological Anthropologists. And each year at the conferences, we do outreach to local high schools. So I wanted to do some play testing at those high schools to kind of gauge response and see how they feel about that.
Love it.
And I think one of the traditional funding models as well for opportunities, grants, right? I think for these, I think we worked with someone a long time ago, the game of science was a potential option, right? So I think you're articulating exactly what is the impact of the game, how you're going to develop it, and the whole spiel, right? Funders like that sort of containment and spread. Question from Jessica. Jessica, if you're able, could you just ask your question away? Not sure if she's awesome. Yay, Jess.
Yeah, sure. Nice job. I was just wondering if down the line there's any thoughts of doing like similar games, but for other topics that are like very, very like in the public media. So like climate change or vaccination, things like that, to help facilitate teaching those topics.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I wanted to see how the response was for this, just because this can be kind of a contentious topic. And it's like, oh, well, if we can get engagement in that, then we could expand into other topics that are our current issues right now. And I would love to expand that down the line.
And it looks like you build a nice platform to do that. So you'll be iterating and responding essentially, right, to the current times, to say, okay, what games are needed now, right? And you've set up that infrastructure to do that. So really, really great. Rose, thank you so much for that input. The website is live for all the previous presentations you've heard. The websites are live. So if you want to get in touch with them, ping them right now. And if you're watching this in the future, do it right now. Okay, email. They're there waiting. Okay, last but not least, Mandy, welcome.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, I think we're all set.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy Pinheiro, and my organization is called Sports Feminist. Before I get started, I wanted to share a little background about me. So I'm a PhD student at Boston University, and I study muscle biology. So I'm actually a former Division I track and field athlete, and I know for me, sports shaped who I am. I developed invaluable characteristics through sports, like my work ethic, my tenacity, and my confidence. And with that, I'm really excited to share more about my organization. Okay, so what's the problem that I'm trying to address? Well, one barrier that perpetuates the gender gap in STEM is lower self-esteem and self-efficacy among girls. And the current environment for learning STEM is not conducive to building self-esteem and self-efficacy. In the classroom, girls face bias, they face gender-specific stereotypes, and lack of role models. So the solution to the problem that I'm proposing is my organization, Sports Feminist. And Sports Feminist uses sports as a medium to build STEM-related self-efficacy and self-esteem in girls throughout Greater Boston. And initially, in the Greater Boston area, I'll be focusing on Dorchester and Roxbury, which are areas that have a diverse group of students who come from underserved backgrounds. We know that participation in sports is associated with higher esteem in girls compared to the girls who don't participate in sports. So that's why we strongly believe that girls can build a strong body and a strong mind while having fun doing so. So research really guides our unique approach, and it's helped us to develop our solution. We also aim to publish our work, so we'll be doing pre and post surveys before and after our intervention. Now moving on to our first intervention. We'll be rolling out a series of sports-based interactive learning workshops where girls will be engaging with the different STEM activities that are focused on, that combine sports and STEM. And I'll give you an example shortly. And through these activities that are interactive, they're going to be reinforcing established Massachusetts curriculum standards to reinforce what they're learning in school. In year 2 of our organization, we'll be adding a mentorship component where we're going to be pairing the middle school girls with females who are professionals in STEM or females who are college majoring in STEM. And we were really excited about that component. Okay, So you might ask, what's a sports interactive activity look like that's focused on STEM? So one example is we can look at the sport of basketball. And a simple question we've asked the girls, what is the best angle to shoot a free throw? So in this activity, they have a lineup and everyone's taking shots at the basketball hoop. And we have an iPad going, so they're engaging with technology. And once they're done shooting, they can go and analyze their video and really assess what angle that they're shooting at. So through this, they learn concepts of physics, geometry, and anatomy, and they can learn how to refine their shot. So these are really fun ways to engage with a variety of STEM subjects. And this is just one example. So this is for basketball. We can do the same thing for soccer, for track and field, for whatever sport we choose. We can apply STEM subjects and kind of engage the girls that way. So to understand our landscape, what's already out there? Well, there are some organizations that touch on aspects of what we do. Girls on the Run is really focused on self-esteem in girls, and Play Like a Girl kind of engages girls in STEM, but not in the same way that we're doing it. What makes us unique is our approach is really research-based. We really looked at the literature to inform our solution. It's outcome-driven, and we're going to be doing those sports-based interactive learning activities. And the reinforcement of Massachusetts STEM curriculum standards is not something that's done in other organizations. Okay, so to evaluate our impact, we're going to be doing those pre and post workshop surveys that we've talked about. And we're going to be using surveys to assess self-efficacy and self-esteem. And these surveys are going to be pulled from the literature that's already established in the field. We're going to be doing pre and post mentorship surveys, along with annual long-term follow-up surveys to see the girls' trajectory as they move on. Our key outcomes will be looking at their attitude. So attitude is going to be evaluating self-esteem or how the girls feel about themselves. And then the STEM skills will be related to the self-efficacy aspect. Basically, do the girls believe they are competent to solve these STEM-related problems? For our traction, well, we've already launched our website, so you can check us out at sportsfeminist.org. We're currently pursuing 2 strategic partnerships, and I've led 5 previously successful sports-based STEM activities. We'll be launching our first event in the greater Boston area in summer of 2022. For our funding, we're going to be focusing on getting a few grants. We have a few grants lined up that we're going to apply to, looking to get some corporate sponsorships, and then also looking for donations. I have a really amazing team of some dynamic ladies who are all former athletes. So we have social worker on the team. We have a fitness expert and a child development expert. So we really come with a wide variety of expertise, and we're really excited about this project. So for our next steps, we'll be pursuing some funding opportunities and working on the event logistics for our launch event. We'll refine the research-based survey and then start to launch our signups for our first event. With that, I would like to thank the whole SAI team and a special thanks to Fanuel, Jess, and my other cohort mates. And I will be taking any questions you have, and feel free to scan the QR code to check out our website or contact me directly. Thank you.
All right, Mandy, awesome. I'm seeing claps and virtual claps. Okay, the floor is open. Okay, I'll throw the first one out. Mandy, can you tell us a little bit more about these mentors, like how you're going to be identifying them, and just the process around that and how they can be integrated?
So initially, to start with, I'm going to be using my existing network as I was a former student athlete. So looking for former teammates or people I've met through, there's a NCAA group in LinkedIn, NCAA After the Game, where I can search for people who are currently STEM professionals and pair them with middle school girls. So that's going to be the first way I'm going to engage the professionals. And then I'm at Boston University, part of the Graduate Women in Science and Engineering, and I have a really awesome network that way. So that's how I'm going to get the mentors.
Yeah, it's always a hard part because you need the program for them also, right?
Definitely.
Like in making sure that they are communicating and integrating with students correctly. So okay, the floor is open. Make sure to check on the chat here. Question from Pete.
Hi, I can't see myself, but can you see and hear me?
I can see you.
Awesome. Okay. So I apologize if you answered this. We had somebody hit their face on something, and so I had to run away real quick. But
No
how
worries.
are you recruiting students to this, to participate in these activities or this program?
Sure. That's a good question. So at the moment, I'm looking at some strategic partners who already have like either after school activities or ongoing events where they have access to middle school students. I think that's the best option for me right now, some established organizations that I can partner with. And I have some team members who, have some really nice connections. So trying to work that out right now. But other than that, I will contact schools directly if needed.
So it's not a standalone yet, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, not yet. And I think for right now, it's, I'm deep in my PhD studies. So time-wise, I think the best option for me is to make it something that's feasible and that's sustainable.
Yeah, great, cool. Really neat project.
Thank you.
All right, we have lots of questions here. Mandy, would you mind removing the share screen?
Sure.
So people can see all the
Sure.
people as well. Great.
Stop share. Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Okay, so we had another hand up. Is it Rose or?
Yeah, sorry. She
go ahead.
she kind of answered my question because I was like, oh, do you envision using social media and what so for building interest? But if you're going through schools, then that's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. So organizations and schools, but also eventually maybe have our standalone events and using that website and then social media to engage the girls and also their parents.
So I think this question from YouTube, I believe you probably had this slide, but do the girls take the pre and post event surveys?
Correct. That's
the
plan.
Okay. And can you just take us a little bit into the survey? Like what kinds of things, and you had the outcomes, right? The key things that you'd be assessing, but yeah, take us a little bit into that. What are you looking to pull from the literature to use in your surveys?
Correct. So I've been pulling some general self-esteem surveys, just self-perceptions, what I believe about myself, and self-efficacy, how you evaluate if you believe that you're competent in a skill. There are a wide variety of questions that aren't necessarily related to what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to be working with my friend Michelle, who's a social worker at Boston Children's, to make something that's really really appropriate for my project. So I haven't exactly narrowed down the questions, but something about, how do I believe I can solve math questions? Maybe it's a broad question. And, if they don't believe that they're really good at solving math questions, and then they see that they, can determine the velocity of a projectile baseball or softball or something like that, like an easy plug and chug question for a middle school girl. Hey, I'm starting to develop confidence in my ability to do that. And I think at that age group, it's really important to collaborate with their peers. So it's definitely something where they're going to be engaging with other girls their age.
Right. Pete, do you still have your hand up or?
Yeah, it's new. It's new. It's a new hand.
It's a new hand. Go for it.
So two things. One, I do attitudes towards science surveys in middle school students often, and would be happy to share our survey. We've tried to make it really short. So it's like 10 questions or something. It's validated, it's ready to go. So I'd be happy to share that with you if you would like. I'll throw my email in the
I would definitely appreciate that. Thank you, Pete.
In the chat. And then I already lost I had another question, but I forgot what it was now. that's okay. If it comes back to me, I'll
Sure, please contact me.
Yeah.
So Claire, question from you. Go ahead.
Hi, are you able to hear me all right?
Yep,
Yes.
can hear you.
Awesome. Mandy, love the project. My question that I had that it would take way too long to type in the chat is, are you planning to do anything to combat the questions that, because you will be, just to confirm, you're surveying like middle school girls, correct?
Correct.
Are you planning to do anything to combat the biases that come about when it comes to the self-efficacy questions, particularly for younger aged women and girls? If there's anything that are you planning to like test their knowledge and skills in some ways, and by throwing in a couple of questions that revolving around science, or are you just going based off of how they rate themselves pre and post?
That's something I've thought about, and I think it's still in the works. So if you have any ideas, I'd be definitely open to hearing them, and ways to do exactly that. Maybe it's like do a sample problem and see it, test STEM abilities but just time wise, I think it should be something that's short, right? So I think that's being refined, but that's a really good point that I will definitely consider as I'm building my survey.
Absolutely, yes. Do feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to collaborate.
Awesome, thank you, Claire.
So the floor is open the last 2 minutes or so that we have left here. If you wanted to ask any question broadly to any of the fellows, the floor is open now. So if there was a question earlier that you couldn't squeeze in, feel free to do so at this time. But Mandy, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I remembered my question, and I think it can broadly go to almost everybody, but it was originally directed towards you, Mandy, because you talked a little bit about diving into the literature and these sorts of things. If you're going to publish your data, if you're going to contribute to that literature, you have to have IRB approval in order to collect, record, and report that data. Are you thinking about how you might do that? Are you working to get IRB approval and things like that? Or
correct. That's a really good point. So I do feel that it's really important to contribute to the pool of literature out there. I think initially the surveys will be for information for us. And then when I have the capacity to apply for IRB approval, I will do so and then work to publish that.
Awesome. This is just like one of my little pet projects of like outreach is real scholarship, and people should feel like they should be publishing it and contributing it to the greater knowledge. So love that.
Yes, definitely agree.
And that's a great question, because it talks into a little bit about, there's research and then there's evaluation, right? And so the IRB, definitely, if you're trying to publish it, you need that for sure. If you're talking about operational, just efficiency at the program level, you don't need the IRB. The question there becomes like, how do I make this thing better, right, internally? The knowledge is for yourself and your team to figure out what to do better next time. But yeah, any broad questions for the fellows? I'm seeing a lot of fantastic jobs. I'm sure you guys are reading this in the comments, but you all did a fantastic job indeed. And again, this is like the launching point, right? The commencement, shall we say, of your journeys, and continuation also. The hard work actually begins or continues now, right? This is a hard thing that you've all decided to do. And I'm just looking back my own experience, and just it's something that inspires me, continues to inspire me. It's passion work, and we're all here to help you. Right? We're all here to help you, help each other as you go forth. Don't disappear, for sure. And for those who are watching this, please get in touch, right? We're all in this together. And I think there isn't enough collaboration. That's something that I've noticed. And the community is screaming for it. They want that collaboration, but they're not really, at least there are no good avenues to do that, per se. So that's my 2 cents there. Any other last minute questions for any of the fellows, or words of encouragement? Okay, so with that, I would like to now share just what's coming up next. Please keep in mind, applications for Cohort 7 are now live. They've been live since November 1, but with the conclusion of Cohort 6, I'm almost teary-eyed and sad. We have really gone and learned about each other, connected over the past 10 weeks. It's as sad that it's come to an end. But with that, Cohort 7 is now open. We will be launching the program in February. So we are looking for the next fellows. So please apply. The link is down below. And then if you want to learn more about the program, reach out to the fellows that just presented, ask them how it went, and what advice do you have? Though I'm sure they'll be happy to share their insights and so forth. And so with that, I wanted to say thank you for attending and join us for the next pitch day. It will be in April. Watch out for the date. All right. Thank you, everybody.